Nyata. It's Rueben Berg here. I'm very lucky to have been able to come down to the Great Ocean Road for the school holidays with the family. And so I'm down here at Lorne, Eastern Mar lands, and thought this would be a good time just to be able to give some updates and share some thoughts about treaty. I'd like to also recognise though that it's quite a troubling time at the moment still for everybody. There's a lot of chaos going on in the world, but I think the treaty conversations are still important ones to have, but I hope everyone's doing it as well as they can out there in these trying times. So we had our Assembly Chamber meeting the other day, which went really well. I was quite happy with all the conversations that we had, and you can see some of the live stream online, and you can find the communique that came out with a lot of the decisions that were made as part of that process. One of the key decisions was around treaty in terms of the different forms of treaty, and so the Assembly agreed and decided that the hybrid model, so both a statewide treaty and local treaties, was going to be the approach that we were going to take to pursue with the government. So that was a really good outcome. What we need to do now though is have more of a conversation around the other elements of the treaty negotiating framework, and that's what we're moving on to now next, especially as part of the treaty negotiating framework committee, which I'm a part of. So there's a lot of important work happening there. And one of the things I think is going to be really interesting to try and work out is how do we specify what elements should be in a statewide treaty, what elements should be just with the groups. What happens if a group wants to negotiate something that's already been agreed on the statewide level? What happens if it's different from what's already agreed? What are some of the groundworks we can set and kind of think through some of the scenarios so we've got that kind of thought through, so that each group isn't having to have that same conversation every time. And I think that's the value of the framework, to provide have that agreement already with the government about how some of that's going to work. And my hope is basically in terms of what's on the table, is what's on the table will be everything that the state government has authority to negotiate. I don't think there should be anything off the table. And I think it might be useful to kind of highlight some of the things that could be on the table, but I really hate for the framework to be too constrictive about exactly what can or cannot be negotiated. I think we need to leave that to the groups whose authority it is to actually negotiate those things. We're just here as the Assembly to set up the framework, the architecture of how that all works, and then the content will come from the actual negotiations. One of the other things I think is going to be interesting to consider around the framework is what happens if one group negotiates a treaty and they get some good outcomes, but then another group comes along in a separate area and they negotiate some better terms. Is it possible for the previous group to then go back and amend and automatically update their terms to match what the other group has agreed to? I think that would be a useful thing to be able to do. But I think we do need to have that, so we need that flexibility in treaties, but also some assurity. You don't want it to be so flexible that it's not, solid, that you don't know what it's about, but to be able to adapt it and adjust it based on new information, new circumstances, I think is going to be important. So that's what I think needs to be in the framework around those sorts of things. Another thing I think is going to be really important to have as part of the framework is a way of specifying that the journey is just as important as the outcome. And that was one of the interesting things I remember hearing from the people in Canada talking about their experiences, was that even for some groups who went through the process who didn't achieve treaty, the process itself was empowering for them. And so that's what we've got to ensure, that it's capacity building, it's empowering Aboriginal people even through the process. Because not all the process is going to get the exact outcome that people want, but the process should still be empowering. So that's some of the things I'll be pushing for in our treaty negotiating framework conversations. We'd always love to hear other people's thoughts, so if you've got ideas of what else should be included, or if you've got particular questions you want me to answer in further videos, just send me a message either below, or you can find my contact details on the First People's Assembly of Victoria website. Thank you everyone for joining in, and talk to you again soon. Wuluk.